Hi there, this is Matt with State of Flux here with a review for Superman 2, the original cut. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about something one of my friends has started. She has started a publishing company called Wandering Witch Publishing. It's a place to read poetry, short stories, novels, and much more. Wandering Witch is a space for growth where imaginative thinkers come together to challenge perspectives by engaging with counterculture through magical realism and real magicalism. I'm going to leave you a link to both her website in the comment area down below, as well as her GoFundMe page to help her with getting her upstarted company up and started. So if you're able to donate, feel free to take a look, see if this is something that would interest you, and donate a little bit. It's always helpful to get something like this off the ground, and I'm really excited for the prospects of what she has to offer. Moving on to the review, Superman 2 is a movie that I'm kind of conflicted about, in that the very first time I saw it, I liked it. I'd been told it was the better of the two movies, better than Superman. And even from the first time I saw it, I felt that was patently not true. There was a lot to like, especially in that climax. However, there were elements that just didn't really ring true to who Superman was. And I also felt like the strength of character that Lois presented in the first movie was kind of lacking in the second one. She seemed almost ditzier at times, which is not who the character of Lois Lane, as presented in the first movie, is, nor who she ever historically was as a character in the comics, at least the comics that I was familiar with and responded to. But I liked it, and I liked it enough to want to continue watching and see what number 3 had to offer. However, years would pass, and then I would learn that the theatrical cut was a retinkering of existing footage and reshoots. Sounds familiar, Warner Brothers. This is something they have historically done recently with another very famous cut. We'll get there in time. But I eventually saw the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. And ever since watching that, I find the theatrical cut almost unwatchable, because the bad scenes almost solely exist in the theatrical cut of the movie, with the exception of 2, and we'll touch on them. But it sticks out like a sore thumb of studio interference and director, well, simply an inferior director handling a subject that he finds a little more hokey than inspiring, or placing any kind of realism to or verisimilitude that Richard Donner took care of recognizing in that first Superman. But I'm going to review the Donner cut not now. I'm going to review it in the context of when I was able to see it, wedged between the two movies that would have come nearest to it. So we'll get to the Donner cut at some point in the distant future. Now I want to talk to you about my base criticisms with this movie. The one thing this does have going for it, sort of, is that they change in this film how the Kryptonians, Zod and Ursa, and the big lug, I can't remember his name. Oh man, what is his name? But they change how they break free. In the Donner cut, it's a direct continuation and ramification of the events of the first movie. In this, they manufacture an action sequence right at the beginning of this movie that I never really responded to, because I felt like it was shot very poorly. Like, you have this set piece set in Paris. I find it hard to believe that they would hear about this breaking news event, immediately send Lois Lane there, her having to get there within a frankly small amount of time for this terrorist operation to start to happen, and for her to get suddenly involved with it and then suddenly need the saving of Superman. Like, it feels like a convoluted way to open the movie, because it was contrived solely as an exciting opener to this. This felt like a studio note rather than a beat that felt natural to the progression of this movie's story. That said, it's Superman whipping the terrorists' bomb into space that releases the Kryptonians in this version of Superman 2. Making it a more self-contained movie, not necessarily wholly relying on that first movie, yet it still opens with a retinkered scene from the first Superman movie to set up who Zod and crew are. So what's the point of changing it? Why not just lean into that opening and make it a direct ramification from what happened before? Because what happened at the end of the first movie, one of the criticisms, one that even I acknowledged in that review, was that you overpowered Superman. You had him debut at a 10, knowing that 10 is the highest it can go. It's not going to go any higher. So, like, it was kind of weird. Having, like, that display of power, but then suddenly having the second movie open with the ramification of that display of power by having the missile thrust up and the missile that he guided up into the air be the one that did it because of his swift track to try and save Lois, creates a stronger opening. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about the Donner Cut, but a lot of the criticisms that I have with this movie have always been there, but are just highlighted further by the Snyder Cut. This opening is a good example of it. The Niagara Falls scene versus the scene set in the Daily Planet, where Lois Lane is figuring out who Superman is, would be the other. And the difference between the two scenes is night and day. In Superman 2, the theatrical cut, she has an inkling that Clark might be Superman, and then manufactures a scenario where she puts her life in jeopardy, and then he saves her but doesn't at the same time. Whereas in the original cut of Superman 2, she uses her own detective skills, her investigative skills, and starts to piece things together. Which sounds like the same thing that I just said, but it's presented in a much more investigative way in the Donner Cut. It was almost as if they didn't think that audiences would or could believe that a female would be smart enough to pick up on this, even though the common criticism of Superman is, how come nobody can figure out the difference between this and this? And so it's like this weird sexism. At least that's how it comes off. Furthermore, when Lois does eventually learn who Superman is the other big scene. And how it's done in the theatrical cut with him accidentally falling and burning his hand, and then her being like, "You really are Superman," is infinitely worse than the scene where she holds the gun up to him. Now, I'm going to talk about that all during my Snyder Cut, my Donner Cut review. So, we're going to put a pin in that for a while. But I think the storytelling of how Lois figures this stuff out is inferior. It's done for laughs, but not necessarily successful ones. And what this movie eventually gets into is the idea of a superhero who is in active duty and doesn't want to be because he wants to follow his own positive life trajectory. He sees a potential out and wants to explore that. That is something that is thrilling and engaging, and what makes this movie kind of work best. I feel like the way that it is utilized in this film is a lot more truncated than we get in the Donner cut, but it always worked, even in my initial viewing of it, and I have to give that praise, for it is this film that gave guidance to films like Spider-Man 2, Wonder Woman 1984, The Dark Knight, a lot of superhero movies, Iron Man 2, a lot of superhero movies follow this trajectory of the second installment has the character questioning if this is what they really want to do, and if there's not some other way that they could impart their legacy or just shed their legacy so that they can be with those that they really choose to want to be with. This gives guidance to that story thread, and does so pretty well. As I say, it's more truncated in the theatrical cut, but it's still there and it still works. To a point. The point where I struggle with it is when Clark gets defensive over the flannel jerk bag that they meet at the diner. That scene is frustrating. It is full of like masculine bullshit that you got of the era, but again, it was of the era, so I'm a little forgiving of that specific scene. It's the coda to that scene that I have a problem with. We'll touch on that in a moment. Why not? No, let's not. Fuck it. We're gonna touch on it now. I hate that scene. The coda of the movie, when Superman gets his superpowers back after shedding them, he saves the day, he does his Superman thing, and then he does the most un-Superman thing you could ever possibly do. He goes back to get revenge on that guy who made him look like a dwip. And he puts that dude in his place, probably rightfully so. He deserves to be put in his place. But the fact that he did that as Clark and stuff, that I hate that scene. I genuinely despise it. He's learned nothing from the hubris of being all-powerful to being frail and mortal. And that coda is literally the worst thing in any Superman movie of the Donner era. The Christopher Reeve era, I should say. But moving on to some more of the positives. Zod is a phenomenal villain, mostly because he is played to pitch-perfect perfection by Terrence Stamp. His "Come, son of Jor-El, kneel before Zod! Kneel before him!" is like just, I could watch that for hours. I wish there was more of that incarnation of Zod. He is so good. Terrence Stamp is a gem, just in general. I like him as an actor, and he's not given his due diligence by most of the filmic world. I think he's a much better actor than people give him credit for, because he gives somewhat campy performances such as this one. However, this is entirely motivated and a good performance based on the script given to him. He makes this work excellently so. Gene Hackman again reprises his role as Lex Luthor, again with another land scheme. He's trying to get Australia. I didn't touch on that in the previous movie, but I loved his scheme in the first movie to try and gain immense wealth by killing millions of people. It was so sinister and dastardly and diabolical, yet he plays it so fun and vibrant. In this, he's just trying to not get his ass kicked and trying to get Australia if he can, and it's hilarious. I enjoy the use of Lex Luthor in this movie. Though I feel like they didn't necessarily know what to do with him, but they knew they wanted him to be involved. and that's kind of how it reads. I feel like another pass or two at that script could have strengthened his integration into the story a little better. But it's what makes this movie work. Not only is Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve again reprising their exceptional performances, even though hers is dumbed down, she still plays it beautifully. Christopher Reeve embodies that character wonderfully, but it's the bombastic action of the climax that really, even now, feels like it holds weight. It's a good fight. It's a good battle. It has stakes. And it says everything you need to know about Superman. And I think that Zod illustrates it perfectly when he says, he cares. He cares for them. That's his weakness. I figured it out. That whole scene, where he realizes that harming Superman is not going to do much of anything. They're just going to be hitting each other all day. But if he starts harming the building around him and harming the people, that is where he can really take hold and start to defeat Superman. And that is what was compelling. And it says everything about Superman. And I love that he is beating these people back and down, and the city's getting destroyed around him, but then he's there also trying to catch like the needles from the towers that are dropping and put them back where they belong. And if he can use that as a trap to nail down one of the bad guys, he's going to do it. And I like how he does a twist to get them to depower themselves. It's quite a little clever maneuver. However, I do have a struggle with the whole, like, if you're gonna use this power, the mother comes in this version. The mother comes in and is like, if you do this, Kal-El, there will be no coming back. And then he gets his powers back because I made a failsafe knowing that this could happen. But then they do it again to Zod and company. It just feels like it could be infinitely done, and he could just constantly be without power when needed and with power when he needed it. It asks more questions than it answers, and it asks a lot of the audience to just go with it. But I think the bigger part of the movie that asks the audience to just go with it is when Clark just realizes that he and Lois can never be, and so he kisses her and wipes her entire reality of the past couple of days away. I hate it. It's not a good look. And I don't like that ending. So yeah, this is kind of a mixed bag of a movie. I'm gonna give it a soft recommendation. This is the slightest 3-star review that I've ever probably given, in that there's a lot of good, but there's a lot of stuff that I also don't like, and it's worse than I don't like it. The stuff I don't like, I genuinely kind of hate. It's not just like, ugh, I wish they'd do that a little differently. It's like, why did they do that? Just why? I don't know. And that's what's frustrating. Roger Ebert once said that a good movie has 3 good scenes and no bad scenes. This does not fit that criteria, so technically it's not a good movie, but I also can't help but recommend it for its influential hold on the superhero genre moving forward. You can name a dozen movies that use this template, some better than others. Spider-Man 2 is the greatest superhero movie I've ever seen. That uses that storyline too. Then there's other ones that aren't as necessarily successful with that. I think Wonder Woman 1984, even though it's a movie that I like, is kind of an example of when it doesn't always work the greatest. But let me know which other movies you can think of that hit that criteria down below. But yeah, I'm a little mixed on this, and I might get into a stronger minutia of what really works and how it works when I do review the Donner cut of the movie in the coming months. But yeah, up next we are going to do a review, stepping away from Superman for a little bit. My next DC film is Wes Craven's Swamp Thing, and I'm so jazzed to do a review for that with you guys. Let me know what you think of Superman 2, the Richard Lester cut, in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Peace.